So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat. I teach history on the textbook platform. So, in this session, let us discuss a topic of ancient Indian history, a very important topic of ancient Indian history, that is the discovery of the Indus Valley Civilization. The discovery of the Indus Valley Civilization. It's a very important topic. In fact, couple of years ago, question also came from this topic, the UPSC mains examination. In fact, many questions were asked from this topic, even in the prelims stage of the examination. So let us spend some time discussing on this particular topic. So the Indus Valley Civilization flourished between 2600 to 1900 BC. So the Indus Valley Civilization flourished the Indian subcontinent between 2600 BCE to about 1900 BC. Okay, point. So this Indus Valley Civilization uh, is one of the oldest civilizations of the world. In fact, in the third millennium BC, that is in 3000 BC time period, four great civilizations existed in the entire world. So in 3000 BC or in the third millennium BC, four great civilizations existed in the entire world. They happen to be one is the Sumerian or Mesopotamian civilization. Sumerian or Mesopotamian civilization. Basically, the Sumerian civilization flourished on the banks of two mighty rivers. One is Tigris, the other is Euphrates. Tigris and Euphrates. This civilization flourished in what we call as the present day Iraq. In the present day Iraq, this great civilization flourished. Then, second, we had the Egyptian civilization. So, the name itself suggests that this civilization flourished in the present day Egypt. So, this civilization flourished on the banks of the river Nile. The third civilization of the third millennium BC is the Chinese civilization. The Chinese civilization, and it flourished in the present day China, flourished on the banks of a river called Yellow River, otherwise called as Hangho. Hangho or Yellow River, one and the same. The fourth civilization of the third millennium BC is the Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization. And this civilization flourished on the banks of two mighty rivers. You remember, this civilization, the Indus Valley Civilization, flourished on the banks of two mighty rivers. One is river Indus, is basically river Sindhu. Second is river Saraswati. Second is river Saraswati. So basically, river Saraswati, uh, the present period is a dried up river. River Saraswati has now dried up. So, but scholars believe that river Saraswati was very active in 3000 BC time period, and this river Saraswati was mostly flowing in the states of Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat. So in these states, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, these states, river Saraswati, once on a time it was flowing, that is in 3000 BC, it was quite active. Scholars believe that the point is river Saraswati is now a dried up river. So Indus Valley civilization flourished on the banks of two mighty rivers. One is river Indus, otherwise Sindhu. Second is river Saraswati. So of the four civilizations of the third millennium BC, of the four civilizations 3000 BC, at a point. The Indus Valley civilization is undoubtedly the biggest civilization. It is also the most technologically advanced when when compared to its contemporary civilization. Let me repeat this point once again. All the four civilizations of the third millennium BC, the Indus Valley Civilization is undoubtedly the biggest civilization. It is also the most technologically advanced civilization. So, for example, this civilization was 20 times bigger in area when compared to the Egyptian civilization, and it was 12 times bigger uh, uh, than the combined. That is, Indus Valley was 12 times bigger than the combined area of Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamian civilization shows that the Indus Valley civilization was spread over a very extensive point. Take a look at the 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 geographical extent of the Harappan or Indus civilization. I have used the term Harappan. Basically, let us use the term Harappan later. Basically, Indus Valley civilization. Indus Valley. So, in fact, the correct name uh, for this civilization is Harappan only, but I will explain the same later. Basically, let us understand the geographical extent of the Indus Valley civilization. So, the northernmost extent of the Indus Valley civilization is Manda Aknur, place called Manda Aknur in Jammu and Kashmir. Southernmost extent of Indus Valley civilization, a place called Daimabad, basically north, basically south. Daimabad named a site in Maharashtra. Then the easternmost extent of Indus Valley civilization, the site called Alamgirpur, is a place close to that of Delhi, located in western UP. And the westernmost uh, site of Indus Valley civilization is 𝐜𝐸𝐸, the name of a place in Pakistan. So basically, Manda, Jammu and Kashmir, Daimabad in Maharashtra, Alamgirpur in western UP, and 𝐜𝐸𝐸 in Pakistan were the north, south, east, west extent. It is basically uh, it was in this area that the Indus Valley civilization was spread. So this entire great civilization was spread basically in this area. If you look at this map, so basically this is basically Manda. Somewhere here we have Daimabad. Then we have 𝐜𝐸𝐸 here somewhere, 𝐜𝐸𝐸. Then we have here is Alamgirpur. So this constitute the this was the geographical area in which the Indus Valley civilization was spread. So the north to south extent of Indus Valley civilization, the north to south extent of Indus Valley civilization was about 1400 kilometers, and the east west extent of Indus Valley civilization is about 600 kilometers. 1400 north to south, east to west is about 60. This entire civilization was spread in about 1.3 million square kilometers of area. Whole Indus Valley civilization was spread in about 1.3 million square kilometers of area. So basically, Indus Valley civilization was spread over a very extensive area. In fact, Indus Valley civilization was the biggest of the four civilizations that flourished in the third millennium BC. The biggest of the four civilizations. So this entire civilization was spread in about 1.3 million square kilometers of area. Then how was this civilization discovered? How was Indus Valley civilization discovered? So that's the topic of today's discussion. So the point is, till 1924, to be very precise, till 1924, none had any idea about the existence of this great civilization the Indian subcontinent. Till 1924, none had any idea about the existence of this great civilization in the Indian subcontinent. It was only in 1924 the world came to know about the fact that India is home to one of the greatest civilizations in the entire world. Point is, it was only in 1924 the entire world came to know about India being home to one of the greatest civilizations in the entire world. So essentially, we are in 2024. Just 100 years ago, we came to know about the existence of Indus Valley City. For that, no one had any idea. This was because this was because this civilization, the Indus Valley Civilization, let me take you back. This civilization flourished between 2600 BC to 1900 BC. This great civilization, this extensive civilization existed between 2600 to 1900. But in 1900 BC, um, the cities of the Indus Valley civilization began to be deserted. About 1900 BC, the cities of the Indus Valley civilization, because what you see in this particular photograph uh, is the excavated site of Harappa. What you see in this photograph is basically the site of Harappa. Harappa is basically a city of Indus Valley civilization. So the point is, by 1900 BC, the cities of Indus Valley civilization began to be deserted. That is, from 1900 BC onwards, people stopped living the cities of Indus Valley civilization. So they became ghost towns. Basically, from 1900 BC onwards, people stopped living, and gradually they turned into ghost towns. And over a period of time, debris began to get accumulated on top of the houses of these cities. Because if no one lives in the houses, gradually small dust particles keep accumulating. Same happened in case of the cities of Indus Valley civilization. So since people stopped living those cities from 1900 BC onwards, at one point, so debris began to get accumulated. Small dust particles and debris began to get accumulated, and small mound-like structures. In fact, mound-like structures began to come into existence on top of these cities. So basically, underneath these mounds were the houses. Since people stopped living those houses for hundreds of years, dust particles began to get accumulated. Over a period of time, mound-like structures appeared on top of these. So entire city got converted in the form of a mound. This is a mound. So underneath the mound were the settlements of the Indus Valley civilization, and this is what happened. So in in the Indus Valley area, that is, when I say Indus Valley area, I am referring to an area where the Indus cities flourished. Numerous mounds began to come into existence. Harappa, Harappa, the city of Indus Valley civilization. So over the city, a huge mound was formed. And similarly, Mohenjo-Daro, another city of Indus Valley civilization. Even over this city, a huge mound came into existence. In fact, almost all the sites of Indus Valley civilization began to get turned into mounds. So that is what happened in course of time. Come to the point. So the point is, I just told you that it was only in 1924, exactly 100 years ago, came to know about the discovery of Indus Valley, came to know about the fact that India is home to one of the greatest civilizations. How did this happen? How was this great civilization discovered? That's the point. Now let us take a look at a brief history of explorations in the Indus Valley. Brief history of exploration. So the first attempt, the point is the mounds about which I just discussed began to intrigue the British officer. The mounds, which were there were numerous mounds in the Indus Valley sites. So the British these mounds began to intrigue the British soldiers and British. One such British soldier was Charles Masson. Charles Masson. So basically, he was a British soldier. He was working for the English East India Company. Charles Masson initially worked for the English East India Company, but later uh, he left. He quit to his job, became a full-time explorer and adventurer. He's basically Charles Masson, a British soldier, but he was also an explorer and adventurer. So after quitting to his job, began exploring the Indus area. Began exploring the Indus area. He in fact uh, uh, visited the mound of Harappa. Charles Mason in fact visited the mound of Harappa way back in 1826. He visited the mound of Harappa 1826 itself, conducted some explorations there. He also collected few relics from the mound of Harappa. So basically, Charles Mason visited the mound of Harappa, conducted some excavations. Then afterwards, he collected a few relics, such as say he collected of pottery, collected some seals, SEALs, collected some bricks. Then afterwards, uh, he did not pursue the exploration and excavation further. He merely collected a few artifacts from the mound of Harappa, and thereafter uh, he gave up the exploration. Gave up exploration. Basically, Charles Mason could not realize that he was standing on a mound. Is a 5,000-year-old settlement. The mound on which Charles Mason was standing was a 5,000-year-old settlement. The point is, Mason indeed visited the mound of Harappa, collected a few relics, but then afterwards he gave up the exploration. He he did not realize that he was standing on a mound which is a 5,000 year. So basically, an attempt was made in 1826 itself, but uh, no major discovery happened as a result of this excavation. That was the first attempt made to discover the Indus Valley Civilization. And the second attempt was made by a British officer by name Alexander Cunningham. Alexander Cunningham. So Cunningham was basically an engineer working for the East India. Cunningham was basically an engineer working for East India Company, but Cunningham was also an archaeologist. Was also an archaeologist. This man, Alexander Cunningham, played a very important role in the establishment of the Archaeological Survey of India in 1801. Cunningham was basically an engineer. He was also an archaeologist, uh, and he played an important role in the establishment of Archaeological Survey of India in the year 1861. So the point is, Cunningham, like Charles Mason, uh, Alexander Cunningham too visited the mound of Harappa. In fact, Cunningham visited the mound of Harappa twice. Once in the year 1853, second in 1856. Dates absolutely not required. But the point is, Alexander Cunningham, like that of Charles Masson, also visited the mound of Harappa. He too started excavating the mound of Harappa, and after a few days, he collected a few relics from the site of Harappa, from the mound of Harappa. Such as say he collected some seals, bricks, pieces of pottery, and some other artifacts. At the same time, Alexander Cunningham also spoke to the people living uh, close to that of the Harappan settlement. Basically, Cunningham also spoke to people who are basically the inhabitants of uh, a settlement close to that of the mound of Harappa. So, close to the mound of Harappa, there were new settlements. Alexander Cunningham went and spoke to the people of those settlements. So the people told Cunningham that the mound perhaps was just 1,000-year-old settlement. Basically, the people of those settlements told Cunningham that the mound was perhaps 1,000-year-old settlement. Cunningham believed in what was told to him by the people. Basically, Cunningham believed in what was told to him by the people. Thereafter, he too gave up the pursuit. He too left the site of Harappa like that of Charles Masson. This is what happened. So to the second attempt also was a failed attempt. Second attempt was also a failed attempt. This is what basically happened in 1856. So Alexander Cunningham, out of curiosity, he too visited the Mount of Harappa, began excavating it, but he could not carry forward the. After a few days, he gave up the excavation process. He believed that possibly he was standing on just 1,000-year-old. He too, like that of Charles Masson, could not realize that he was standing on a settlement which is basically one of the ancient most settlements in the entire world. One of the ancient most settlements. Could not realize that he was standing on 5,000-year-old. This is what happened. Come to the third attempt. The third attempt to excavate the site of Harappa or the sites of Indus Valley Civilization was made by John Marshall. John Hubert Marshall, or in short, John Marshall. So, John Marshall was a trained British archaeologist. He was a full time archaeologist. And in fact, John Marshall served as the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India between 1902 to 1908. Between 1902 to 19, he was a trained archaeologist. He was in fact appointed as the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India from 1902 to 19. So it was under his supervision, was under the supervision of John Marshall. Finally, Indus Valley Civilization was discovered in the year 1904. Was under his supervision that finally the Indus Valley Civilization was discovered in the year 1904. So basically, uh, since he was a trained archaeologist, the mounds of Harappa and the mound of Mohenjo-Daro began to intrigue him very much. Point is, he was a trained archaeologist. He visited, in fact, John Marshall visited the mound of Harappa and the mound of Mohenjo-Daro many times. So he was very intrigued to see large mounds, both of these sites, that is the site of Harappa and site of Mohenjo-Daro. Finally, in 1920, he appointed an archaeologist by name Dayaram Sahni. Name is also important, can you remember? In 1920, John Marshall appointed one Mr. Dayaram Sahni to excavate the Harappan mound. So basically, Dayaram Sahni was appointed in 1920 to excavate the Harappan Mount. So Dayaram Sahni undertook an extensive excavation at the point. So various artifacts, various objects uh, which appeared to be very old began to be discovered by Dayaram Sahni. Let me repeat this point once again. Basically, Dayaram Sahni he began excavating the mound of Harappa. During the excavation and discovering objects which were not seen before by any of the archaeologists, he began discovering objects which appeared to be very, very old objects, very, very ancient most objects. And he began reporting the same. That is, Dayaram Sahni began reporting the same to John Marshall. John Marshall, by this time, by 1921, John Marshall was convinced that possibly these settlements, these mounds, the Harappan Mound and Mohenjo-Daro Mound, were possibly one of the ancient world. So immediately, John Marshall appointed one more archaeologist by name R.D. Banerjee to excavate the mound of Harappa, to excavate the mound of Mohenjo-Daro. Repeat this point once again. What happened? Initially, in 1920, John Marshall appointed Dayaram Sahni to excavate the mound of Harappa. Point. So, Dayaram Sahni began discovering objects which are very uh, old objects, very ancient objects, which were not seen by the archaeologist at all. Type of objects, the kind of objects that were discovered uh, the mound of Harappa were not seen by the archaeologists before. So that began to generate even more interest in John Marshall. Therefore, in 1921, John Marshall appointed one more archaeologist by name R.D. Banerjee to excavate the mound of Mohenjo-Daro. To excavate the mound of Mohenjo-Daro. So the point is, it is these excavations were carried out extensively in both of these sites, that is the site of Harappa and site of Mohenjo-Daro. Finally, it was in 1924. Was in 1924. Year is also important, that John Marshall made a groundbreaking revelation. So basically, in 1924, John Marshall made groundbreaking. The revelation being, he declared that India is home to one of the ancient world. So it was John Marshall who declared to the entire world that India is not India. The history of India goes back to thousands of years. It is John Marshall who declared that India is home to one of the largest civilizations, one of the ancient most civilizations in the entire world. How did this happen? How did John Marshall come to this conclusion? Let us understand points relating to this particular. So, how did John Marshall come to? Basically, John Marshall. The point is at uh, at Mohenjo-Daro, excavations were carried out at Mohenjo-Daro. When excavations were carried out at Mohenjo-Daro by R.D. Banerjee, a Buddhist monastery was discovered. Buddhist Buddhist monastery was discovered. So during the excavations at Mohenjo-Daro by R.D. Banerjee, a Buddhist monastery was discovered, and it was also realized. It also came to light that this Buddhist monastery uh, belonged to the period of the Kushans. The Buddhist monastery at Mohenjo-Daro belonged to that of the period of the Kushans. And Kushans, everyone knew by this time itself that Kushans ruled northern part of India in the first century AD. Means that when the when R.D. Banerjee discovered monastery at Mohenjo-Daro, he realized that the Mohenjo-Daro settlement is not a new settlement. He realized that since Buddhist monastery itself was constructed in first century, means that Mohenjo-Daro is at least a 2000-year-old. So the point is we are in 2024 now. 1924, the scholars realized that India is home to ancient most of the world. But the point is basically at Mohenjo-Daro excavations were carried out. During the excavations, Buddhist monastery was discovered, and this Buddhist monastery was constructed during time period of the Kushans. And Kushans, by the way, ruled in first century. It means that this Buddhist monastery is a 2000-year-old monastery. So basically, after the discovery of this monastery, R.D. Banerjee realized that Mohenjo-Daro is not in, is one of is an ancient settlement. Then then R.D. Banerjee also R.D. Banerjee then R.D. Banerjee also discovered that there he also discovered that there are settlements even beneath that of the Buddhist monastery. The point is, Buddhist monastery was discovered first, but R.D. Banerjee also realized that there are structures even below that of the Buddhist monastery. If that be the case, if Buddhist monastery is a 2000-year-old settlement, is if Buddhist monastery is 2000-year-old, the structures lying below that of a Buddhist monastery must be even older one. When the Buddhist monastery itself is a 2000-year-old structure, if the structures that be the case, the structures existing beneath the Buddhist monastery must be even more older structures. So this is the obvious conclusion that anyone can draw. So therefore, R.D. Banerjee began continuing his excavation, and during these excavations, R.D. Banerjee could not come across any of the evidence of iron tools weapons. So during the entire excavation, R.D. Banerjee and Dayaram Sahni could not discover any iron tools or iron weapons. It means that if that be the case, the point is the scholars knew by this time that the iron came into use around 1000 BC time period. So from around 1000 BC period, use of iron began in India, and in the entire excavation, nowhere in uh, the entire excavation process at Mohenjo-Daro, not once the evidence of the use of iron was found. So it means that iron was iron came into use in 1000 BC. Yeah, that be the case. If no evidence of iron is found in Mohenjo-Daro, means that this site of Mohenjo-Daro must be older than 1000 BC settlement. As the point is, iron came into use 1000 BC, and in the entire excavation, nowhere the evidence of the use of iron found. So, what conclusion can one draw? One can come to the conclusion that possibly uh, the site of Mohenjo-Daro was a settlement uh, much older than 1000 BC. That's the obvious conclusion to which any hope I am clear. So the point is that's how R.D. Ben, Dayaram Sahni, and John Marshall have come to the conclusion that Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa are not just 1000, are one of the ancient world. And the point is, what all artifacts that were collected from these excavations, what all artifacts that were collected from this were photographed, were published in the international journal in archaeology. Point is, what all artifacts that were discovered, that were excavated from both the sites, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, they were carefully photographed, and those photographs were published in uh, the international journal. So the point is, the other archaeologists who were working in Mesopotamia, other archaeologists who also were working on Mesopotamia, realized that the artifacts discovered from the site of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were quite similar to the artifacts discovered from Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, I told you, is a civilization that was based in Iraq. So the point is, the same type of artifacts that were discovered from Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were also discovered from the sites of Mesopotamia. And by this time, by 1920 itself, the archaeologists knew very well that Mesopotamia existed in 3000 BC time period. By 1920 itself, the archaeologists knew very well that the Mesopotamian civilization flourished in 3000 BC. So when uh, when the artifacts, the objects discovered from Mohenjo-Daro were quite similar to the artifacts discovered from Mesopotamia, and when you know very well that Mesopotamia flourished in 3000 BC, what conclusion can one come to? The obvious conclusion that one can come to is that if Mesopotamia existed in 1000 BC, Indus Valley Civilization, or for that matter, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, must have also existed in the same 3000. That's how scholars came to the conclusion that is how uh, John Marshall came to that the Indus Valley Civilization was one of the ancient, is a contemporary civilization to that of the other ancient, is contemporary to the remaining three civilizations. That's how John Marshall came to this particular. So the discovery of Indus Valley Civilization itself is a interesting. That is what we have tried to discuss. Some other class will discuss. We'll take up a discussion on the name of the Indus Valley Civilization. But for the time being, uh, 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 that's how this civilization was by John Marshall in 1920. So finally, the point is, John Marshall is a groundbreaking revelation the year 1920. So that's all for today. Uh, we can discuss a related topic from the same chapter in some other class. But for today, that's all for today. See you in the